6 lines from the top. The 6 lines from the top. Vayi Avram ben Tishim Shana v'Seisha Shanim. Avram is 99 years old. Vayera Hashem el Avram v'yomer lav ani kel shakai. I am kel shakai. Hishalech lefanai v'heyeh samim. Go before me and be perfect. Then he gives him the command. Ve'etna brisi beini uvenecha ve'arbe oscha bim'od me'od. I will make a covenant between us, and I will increase you very much. Okay, everybody see where there is on page 72. Mm-hmm. And then he goes down and he says, he promises him that he's going to be abundant and everything else. And then he says on the next page, second line from the top, Zos brisi asher tishbru beini uvenechem. This is the covenant you should keep between me and you. Uvein zeracha acharecha. Himo lachem kol zachar. All males shall be circumcised. Now, then one more pasuk. Two more pasukim. Unemaltem es besaro laschem. You should circumcise your foreskin. V'haya laoz bris beini uvenechem. It will be a sign of a covenant between us. Uven shmonas yamim yimo lachem. 8 days old. You should circumcise kol zachar l'dorsechem. Yilid bayis umiknas kesef. Anybody born or purchased. Mikol ben nechar asher lo mizaracha. Okay. So the command of bris milah, and the command is to do it on the 8th day. Obviously, Avraham Avinu has to go and do it now, and he's not 8 days old. Avram's 99 years old. Yishmael is 13 years old, and he's told to go and circumcise to do the bris milah. So the question here is like this: this whole idea of a bris milah, which we do till this day, the idea of a bris milah. What's underlying this entire thing? Circumcise. And why does it have to be done on the 8th day? What's it all about? So the idea behind bris milah is like this. First of all, the Rambam says that any organ in the body, any limb in the body that undergoes a surgery is going to be weaker once it's had the surgery. And the Rambam says that man's drive, the sexual drive, because the organ undergoes a surgery, it is weakened. Now, whether that means physically or whether that means on a spiritual level, that's what the Rambam says. That's what the Rambam says. The Rambam says that the bris milah actually helps us to control that dominating area of life, an area of life which is so dominating. Most people say, well, can you imagine what it would be like without it? Right? If it's so dominating with it, imagine what it would be like without it, number one. Number two, becomes the pact between God and Avram Avinu, and it's a very difficult thing, and it has to do with offspring, and it's on the 8th day. It's on the organ of reproduction, and it has to do on the 8th day. Now, why does it have to be done on the 8th day? We'll try to understand this a little bit more. Talk a little practical today to understand the thing. I'll hold for a few minutes, then we'll take a few questions. So the number 8, is the number that always represents the dimension that transcends nature. That you've heard? You've heard that idea that the world was created in 7 days. And the number 8 is obviously the number that transcends nature. It's a number that, if 7 is the natural world, 8 is the miracle, the world of the miracle, the world that goes beyond nature. So, for example, Hanukkah is 8 days. Classic example. You have Hanukkah as the miracle, the miraculous victory over the Greek armies. And that's on an 8-day celebration, and that's what the number 8 always represents. So what God is telling Avram Avinu is like this. I'll give you an example. I think the example works very well. I don't know if you guys are into sports. If you're not, you should be. But imagine I tell you, okay, they're having the NCAA tournament. They have the NCAA. 64 teams enter the NCAA tournament. Now, if I would tell you, you pick one team, and I'll take the rest of the field. What would you do? I would certainly take the field. The NCAA is very difficult to predict unless there's one clear-cut favorite. But in general, there isn't, and you're always better off taking the field in just about any sport. If there are 4 teams going in, you start with 16 teams going into the baseball playoffs. You take one team, I'll take the field. I'll take that in any sport. Because it's difficult to know, difficult to know in any sport which is the one team that's going to win. And you're always better off. Now, just imagine you are Avram Avinu. And at the time of Avram Avinu, you're being told okay, I'm going to give you children, and your children are going to have to survive the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Crusades, the Khmelnytsky massacres, the Nazis, the Arabs. Your children are going to have to survive all of this. Now, who would you bet on if you were Avraham, if you were not a prophet? Who would you bet on? Would you take the Jews or would you take the field? You understand? You're much better off taking. I mean, every one of them is a stronger team, and the whole bunch of them combined, you know, it doesn't. So what does God say to Avraham? God says to Avraham, okay, here's a bris. You know what the bris is? It's on your organ of reproduction, representing your offspring, and it's going to be on the 8th day, meaning that your offspring is only going to survive because they're going to transcend natural law. That means when left to the laws that, you know, the Jews are compared to the sheep among the 70 wolves. So what happens if you have a sheep among 70 wolves? So if the shepherd is there watching over the sheep, protecting the sheep, so then the sheep could survive. One sheep surrounded by 70 wolves, but there's a shepherd watching the sheep. But what would happen if the shepherd would step out of the picture? He would leave the sheep to the natural running of the world. Well, what happens when you leave a sheep to the natural running of the world? Well, the wolves rip it apart. They don't eat it, they rip it apart, right? The shepherd is worse than being eaten. You know, they're ripped apart. So the Jewish people, if we live by natural law, within natural law, we should have been disappeared a long time ago. So what's God telling Avraham Avinu? Your offspring, I'm giving you a covenant on your offspring. I'm making you a promise. We're making a pact over here. You circumcise on the 8th day, the number that transcends nature, and your descendants, represented by the organ of reproduction, are going to survive only because they survive beyond natural law. So God comes to Avraham Avinu and says, really, you should be defeated by the field. But you have a special protection because you are going to transcend nature. The bris milah is the sign that the Jewish people transcend nature, and therefore we're here with lots of miracles that have gotten us here with no rational explanation. Even Mark Twain, who was not Jewish, has that famous thing that he wrote, which is profound. It's just profound because even Mark Twain was just baffled, like, hey, what's with these people? And he's not one of us. It's not like Mark Twain grew up in B'nai Brak. Mark Twain is not Jewish, and he's taking a look and he's saying, hey, you know, the Babylonian is gone, the Greek is gone, the Roman is gone. Now, what are these people doing here? Why is Goldstein still around? That's what, you know, and Mark Twain himself says, you know, what is with these people? So that's what God is telling you. God is ultimately telling the Jewish people, telling Avraham that's going to be survived. Now, just practically, by the way, one idea behind the bris milah is that bris milah, the Rambam says, and again, I don't know exactly what the Rambam means. It means that the organ is weakened, meaning that entire drive, the entire area of life is controlled to a certain extent, or is potentially able to be controlled, number one. Number two, the bris milah represents, you know, a baby is 8 days old, and this is as close as we get to human sacrifice. When a baby is circumcised, so one of the things that the mitzvah is for the father to have a son circumcised. So what the father does, you put him on the lap of the man called the sandak. The sandak is the guy who holds the baby, and which has unfortunately been sacrilegiously translated as the Godfather. Right, and as a matter of fact, when the movie The Godfather came to Israel, they called it Hasandak, right? You know, which is absolutely an abomination. But the what do you call it? So the sandak is the man who holds the baby. Now sandak is actually participating in the bris. The sandak is actually because he's holding the baby's legs, and the mole is doing that. Now, when the mole, before the father puts down, the mole says to the father, the lap of the sandak is an altar, and your baby is your son is an offering. This is as close as we'd get to the human sacrifice. Human sacrifice is frowned upon in Judaism, and this is as close as. And I have to understand, a woman's just given birth. She's in pain. Her body is haywire. She's in pain. She's emotional. She's teary. She's weepy. She's tired. She's in pain, and her baby is being whisked off by a group of men with beards, one of whom has a knife. It's hard on the mother's nerves. You know, and they do the circumcision. And what happens is that the idea, one of the commentators, the idea is that this is a reminder to us, just as a Jew is physically perfected through pain, so too we reach our spiritual perfection through a little bit of pain as well. That means like this, in the Israeli army, ironically, ironically, we are born flawed. The flaw is the foreskin. And it's only after the fourth. That's why God says, go before me and be perfect. That means we're going to remove, you have one blemish left that has to be removed, which is the foreskin. So the Israeli army, which unfortunately is not a halachic abiding by the secular state, obviously. And I'm not knocking anybody, I'm just telling you the facts. In the Israeli army, a Jewish soldier automatically loses 3 points on his profile if he has circumcision. They automatically can get it. The only ones who get 100 are the Druze, Christian, Arabs who do not circumcise. The Jewish soldier who circumcises automatically gets 3 points knocked off. He gets a 97. Now that's not a Torah perspective. The Torah perspective is you get a 97 if you haven't been circumcised. As a circumcision, that perfects us. And the reminder is that just like a baby goes through a certain amount of pain, by the way, vitamin K, which is the vitamin responsible for clotting, reaches peak levels on the 8th day. How's that for an interesting coincidence? Right? Vitamin K reaches the peak levels on the 8th day. And the baby, number one, the idea here is that the baby goes through the circumcision. That's a reminder, yeah, he's physical. It's a little bit of pain, nowhere near what it would hurt an adult. Nowhere near the nerve endings are not as developed. But it is a reminder that a Jew also, physical perfection comes with a little bit of pain. Spiritual perfection comes with a little bit of pain. Sometimes the person has to sacrifice. Sometimes things aren't so easy in life. Sometimes the person has to go through a little bit of ordeal in order to bring ourselves to perfection. That's part of the idea. By the way, they will not do a bris milah on a baby if a baby has any physical, if a baby has any ailments. So first of all, the mohel always comes to check the baby to see. First of all, the baby has to be a certain weight. I think it's I think it's 2.5 kilo. I think it comes out to 5.5 pounds. Baby has to be 5.5 pounds to do a bris. Number one, if the baby is yellow, which is very common, where the bilirubin is still, the liver is not clearing out whatever it is that it's supposed to, it's not functioning fully. The baby's little, so they push it off. The bilirubin also has to be, there's a certain number, which is the cutoff point, where if the baby has to get in, they'll put the baby under the lights in the hospital to bring down the number. If the baby has any sort of infection, usually very common babies, they get these eye infections. And again, I guess it's a product of evolution, that it's mother's milk that takes care of the eye infection, right? So that was a joke, by the way. I didn't mean that. The evolution, yeah. So the same HaKadosh Baruch Hu provided that, and if there have been plenty of brises where everything, the tables are set, the food is there, everybody's ready to go, and at the last minute, the mohel takes a look at the baby, so they can't do a bris on this baby. The baby wakes up on the 8th day, has a little bit of a fever and infection, and everybody goes home. And first they eat, of course, because they're Jewish. They eat, and then they go home. And then what you'll get is, because you got to do the bris as soon as possible. As soon as the baby's healthy, they'll do the bris. So that's it. Now, if anybody has had a bris, if anybody is not, in order to have a valid bris, it has to be done on the 8th day or later by a Shomer Shabbos Jew. So if anybody has had a circumcision in the hospital, either before the 8th day or it's been after the 8th day, but it's by a doctor or somebody who is not a Shomer Shabbos Jew, it is not a valid circumcision. And what's done under those circumstances is something called hatafas dam bris, where they let out a drop of blood from that area. It's relatively painless, and they just draw up, they make a poke and they draw out a little bit of blood, and it's relatively painless. More complex is people who are older and have not had a bris milah at all, which was common in the 70s when Russian Jews were coming over. They didn't have bris milah at all. There is already, you're talking about a full anesthesia. You're talking about a full anesthesia, at least a local anesthesia. Because it's pretty rough. So that is the idea. That's the idea of bris milah. Now you'll notice that all of this takes place before Yitzchak is born, because Yishmael is born to an uncircumcised Avram Avinu. Yitzchak is only born after Avram Avinu is circumcised. So we'll see what Yitzchak is all about. We'll see what Yitzchak is all about in a little while. Okay. Now, take a look. Just one last part over here. One last part, because this is an introduction to the next parsha. So Avram Avinu circumcises, and then God says, "I will bless you, and I'm going to give you a son from Sarah." And 4 lines from the bottom, Vayipol Avram al panav vayitzchak. Avram falls on his face and he laughs. Vayomer belibo, he says in his heart, Ven mea shana yivoled v'im Sarah bastishi shana. What, I'm going to have a child at 100 and Sarah's going to have a child at 90? But this is a laughter of joy. Keep that in mind. Avram is laughing. It's not that he's doubting anything. He says, wow, I can't believe it. We're going to have a child. And he's laughing out of joy. It's a laughter of happiness. Okay? Keep that in mind. So Avraham Avinu does the bris milah, then turn to the next parsha.